Hello again, my wonderful nonverbal students, nonverbal communication students, I should say. I am talking today about the first part of Chapter 4 on proxemics, and I'm looking at, in our lovely textbook, I'm looking at page 108. And I want to start off by saying that proxemics, our use of space, okay, is one of the oldest researched variables in a fairly new field. Nonverbal communication kind of came into being more in like the 50s and 60s. So that's fairly recent compared to other disciplines that are a lot older. But proxemics was something that they looked at quite early on. It can be very obvious. Yep. Sorry, moved too close to the camera. It can be very subtle, and it reveals a whole lot about people, about their attitudes, about how much they like other people. It will show you a whole lot of things. So if you know what to look for and you can recognize some subtleties in how people space themselves, well, you can better understand them. You have to start, of course, with yourself. What is your need for space? I will tell you, American culture is kind of in the middle. We probably need more space than maybe the Europeans or maybe some Latin countries. Texans tend to need a lot of space because if you grew up here, you grew up with a lot of space. And if you grew up in New York City or in a dense urban environment, you might not need as much space. You might be able to be fine in a two-bedroom apartment with 4 roommates because you probably have to do that to live in New York City. But anyway, so think about your own space needs. I know that I always have to kind of gear myself up when I go to Europe. I love going to Europe. I love going to England particularly. Been to England a lot. And I have to kind of gear myself up because the spaces are small. The hotel rooms are smaller. The flats that you might rent over there are smaller. When I studied at Oxford, I had a room to myself at St. Hilda's College in Oxford. But, little twin bed and pretty tiny, and you just have to kind of gear yourself up for an adjustment to space. So we can adjust our space needs. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, okay? I want you to pay a lot of attention to Hall's zones of space. E.T. Hall gave us 4 zones of space, and you can guarantee these are going to be all over your quiz on this material. Intimate space is the first level. That is 0, meaning contact, to 1.5 feet, 0 to 18 inches. Those are usually, that's a space reserved for intimates. I mean, think about, 18 inches away from you. That's somebody up pretty close. And there's not very many people that we allow in that zone, okay? Second zone, zone 2, is personal space. 1.5 to 4 feet. That's where more personal encounters happen, friendships, maybe co-workers, about 1.5 to 4. Now, it's quite different somebody you let within 1.5 feet and somebody you let only within about 4 feet. And we know all of this is kind of changing right now, right? E.T. Hall, he couldn't have anticipated we'd have a thing called social distancing. So the pandemic situation has changed a lot of things about how people space. And I think you've seen some of these news footage things of people not doing social distancing. And it troubles me a lot. But I do think it is awkward for people to keep 6 foot of distance. If you have friends and you're used to talking to them at 3 or 4 feet, and now you got to keep 6 feet away from your friends, that's a little tough. It's tough for us to do. I do agree that we have to do it, but it's tough. It's just not natural for us. Okay, zone 3 is called social space. Okay, so we have intimate, then we have personal, we have social space, which is a little bit bigger. That's 4 to 12 feet. This is with people you don't know quite as well. Zone 4 is public space, and that is 12 feet and beyond, and usually that means, between communicators, like in a public speaking situation or something. So please take a look at those on pages 108 to 109. There are a lot of factors that cause you to use space in the way that you do. First, biggest, your culture. Okay, so the kind of space distances that we have or that E.T. Hall gave us tend to be more Western. If you're in Japan, that is going to be different. If you're in Saudi Arabia, it's going to be different. If you're in Brazil, it's going to be different. So just realize that culture, of course, affects everything in nonverbal, but it very much affects people's expectations and their use of the space around them. Okay, gender and sexuality affect your spacing with people. Sometimes in terms of biological sex, the funniest thing to me is when guys go to the movie theater together and they put that one seat, in the middle. There's a seat in the middle between them. And I've asked some men sometimes, I'm like, what is up with that? I mean, if I went with a girlfriend to a movie theater and I'm like, well, we need to sit a seat apart, she'd be like, you crazy? I had a guy one time tell me that, well, that's where the popcorn goes, is in the empty seat between you. Yeah, I've never seen two guys share a bucket of popcorn, but okay, if that's it. I don't know what the deal is with space. Anyway, read that stuff on gender and sex and sexuality and space issues. Age affects space. Sometimes older people are given a wider berth of space, which is odd because sometimes people are maybe fearful, or sadly, they may be kind of repulsed by how an old person looks, or that being in the close space of an older person may make you aware of your own aging. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons. Children have to learn space, and it's interesting, when the children don't process space like adults do, and you wonder who's smarter. Those of us who've learned some rigid ways of being, or just the kids, Physical characteristics. Your height, your weight, just size in general makes people space differently. Some very interesting research done in the last couple of years on morbidly obese people and space. And basically the upshot of the findings were that a lot of people put bigger distances between themselves and obese or morbidly obese people. Lots of reasons for that. Not all of them, I guess, kind of sad. But it does happen that people, it's not just to give a bigger person a bigger space. It is a pulling back and a distancing from a larger person. And it happens. So be aware. Other things, the characteristics of the relationship between the two people. If two people are communicating, the space may be wider if they don't like each other very much. Or, the relationship you have with people it shows, how much you're going to space yourself with them. Are you going to get closer to them or further away? Subject matter. You may be very close to somebody, but the stuff they're talking about makes you kind of back up. Makes you want to kind of get some space. We talk about space a lot, don't we? I need space. Yeah. So the setting makes a difference. You may be in kind of a crowded or a very dense setting, and you have to position yourself closer to people. But there's situations like this all the time in terms of crowds, and the pandemic has certainly affected that too in terms of what's considered a crowd now. And how much space do people need to stay safe and to stay healthy? So a lot of this in this chapter, I'm going to have to rewrite this chapter pretty soon because some of this stuff has changed. And who knows if it'll change back or if it'll change us for the long term. We don't know yet. Okay, so that takes me up to the end of the first half of the proxemics chapter, and I'm going to close there and say bye, and I'll be talking to you again very soon. Stay safe, all y'all. Bye.